Do. Hey, everybody, I'm Dr. Terry Wager, and this is me and Kevin. We're running a little bit late today because Kevin had a sales appointment that was going a little bit long. But
I
we're talking, what are we
apologize.
talking about today, Kevin?
We're talking about finding your next step in your business, what that
And,
looks
and
like, and when to take it.
yeah, and we've named this faith and uncertainty, finding your next step when stuck or stumbling. And the reason is because a lot of people react, and a lot of people have trouble with what's next, or trouble with, you know, um, and I mean, you could speak to this too. Is like there's the shiny object where they're bouncing all over the place, trying to do all kinds of things, and then some people just won't give up and stick blindly to a bad idea. And so um, we were talking earlier about somebody who's really crushing it in your world, and how it's not necessarily a formula as much as just things are working out for him. And then the question is why are things working out for some but not others? And so, thoughts?
Yeah, um, I think a lot of people uh, get stuck in this analysis paralysis kind of idea, and the issue with over analyzing everything, while there are perks to being very analytical and looking at the data, sometimes if you're growing, say, a business, right, and you're a newer business, you don't have that data. So what do you go off of? Well, you kind of have to go off of faith to a certain extent. I mean, you do your best to reach out to those that have experience in that area, or maybe there's people that you watch that have traveled those paths before, but ultimately there has to just be a level of just, I'm going to just trust that things are going to land where they need to land. And you have to take that next step. And statistically, most businesses fail. And there's a reason most smart people don't start businesses. And it's because it's actually a good idea. I even tell people now, I'm all about entrepreneurship and starting your own business, but I just try to relay to them what they're really walking into and to just be prepared for it. You can do it. I think most people can do it. I don't think most people want to do it. And they don't realize they don't want to do it. And that's because of again, being in that uncertainty, there's a lot of chaos. And really, a lot of times, especially in the beginning, it's, your North Star is really your belief in yourself, that, things will, that the next step will uncover itself to you. It's
That's
tough because
that's
it's not in your control.
that's really good. I like that. And one of the things Christine and I do when we're working with people is really um, dive into why this business. Why did you decide to do this? Why are you making this business exist? Because this business is, in a way, your baby. It's why you're doing what you're doing. And if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, nobody else will. And then nobody else will care if you don't care. And so there's a big piece to that idea of that North Star. Why I do what I do matters immensely, because it gets you up in the morning, it keeps you going, and it conveys to other people why they should be working with you.
Right. Yeah, understanding why you're doing what you're doing is super important, and having that criteria around that will make it easier to make decisions in the future when you don't have all the data. You can at least make your best shot. You're like, all right, well, this is what I believe in. For instance, myself, right? My one of my core beliefs is that you take care of your people, they'll take care of you. So if I'm making a decision, let's say I want to hire somebody, to get this job done in an area that I'm not super familiar with. A lot of people will still try to look for some kind of discount, some kind of deal in that realm. For me, and I'm not saying right or wrong, it's just my personal approach. Like, I want people around me to get paid. If they want to give me some kind of deal, that's totally on them, but I'm not going to be the one asking for it. And
Yeah.
the reason for that is because I want to be able to trust in their judgment. But that's like so if I'm making a decision, for example, if I'm like, say I need to hire a subcontractor in an area that I'm not familiar with, like I'm not gonna go for the cheap deal. In general, I want them to be taken care of because they are likely going to help me uncover the next step that I need to take in my business. And if they're
Yeah, that's
getting
good. That's good. I
shafted,
like that.
if they feel like they're getting shafted, they're not gonna, they're likely not gonna be as useful and willing to help. And I don't, personally, I don't want that kind of energy around me. So that's kind of one way I discern in areas that I don't have all the data in.
Yeah, and I love that idea that you're really thinking about, if I have faith that these guys are going to follow through with what they're doing, I pay them right. That's good. One of the things that I think a lot about is, and it's probably more in the spiritual realm of things, especially when we're talking about faith. For me, it's like I have faith that if I'm doing this and it's helping somebody out, it'll come back to me in some way, even if it doesn't come back through that person. And so it really, and I talk about faith in the process a lot. And what I'm talking about a lot of times is my emotional model and faith in the process of I'm identifying what's going on with me, and I'm sticking to and connected to what's happening with me, and I'm sharing completely open with people, and being there for them in the moment, and not worrying about my agenda or worrying about what's happening with me or worrying about all of those things that could freak me out in my own life. But if I'm just present for people, they're going to have a result. And what's going to happen to me in the world is that's going to come back to me and take care of all of this stuff that I'm leaving out of the issue. And so I like to think that it's an even higher level of transaction that's more about just knowing what's next is going to come out of me being the best version of me in this situation, with them being of service, whether it's, me listening and witnessing what somebody's going through, me giving advice about what they're going through, and maybe a different way to deal with things, which is one of the things that I'm really good at, is being that trusted advisor. But a lot of that came from the idea that I listened to a lot of people and I put myself aside, and my stuff is still there. It's still, I'm still affected by that stuff. But even years ago, when I started making changes in my own life, I was taught, have faith in the process and go help somebody else. And what that's done is it's really helped me to be able to put my stuff aside and not worry about it so much, and not worry about what's next or not worry about that, but just help the person in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. What goes around comes around. But I think, knowing why you're standing something, and I also think knowing who you are as a person, right? Knowing your strengths. You mentioned, you're good in an area, right? People have their strengths, people have their weaknesses. So, like for example, myself, um, I was trying to figure, just a real life example. I was trying to figure out how to put all this. I'm trying to get data on leads and sales conversion, so that way I can have, I can make more informed decisions and where to put our marketing dollars, etc. Problem is the way our system was set up was I had to take this long route to get this data, and what ended up happening was I'd have to pretty much do the same thing over and over to acquire this data. And what happened was I wouldn't do it because it would take so long, and therefore we had less data, etc. And I just kept trying. I was like in a year and a half battle with this spreadsheet trying to put something together. And and it's just not something that I'm super interested in. So, I definitely could be putting more time into learning, but I'm not, right? Because it's just my natural inclination. Could I just grind it and force myself to do it? Absolutely. I could just sit there in a room 8 hours. I'm going to learn how to do spreadsheets. But at the same time, I was working on it one day and I thought about, our controller, John, and he's a process analyst as well. And this is like his wheelhouse. He's been doing this for 10 years and he works for us. I'm like, I was sitting there one day, like in the office, and he's here. I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? I'm like, I go and ask John. He pretty much whips something up in like 2 hours. He's like, oh, I told him what I'm looking for, and he whips it up in like two hours or so. What I've been trying to work on for like a year and a half. So it's also that level of like knowing who you are. Like, for me, I really like working with people. I'm good with people. That's more my wheelhouse. But when it comes to spreadsheets and comes to like collecting data, I like using data, but collecting data, it just drains the hell out of me.
Absolutely.
And it's so
That's
it's you can use that too as like knowing who you are. Like if for me, for example, if I need help in that realm, I'm gonna be more likely to search someone else out for a solution because there's a lot of people that just white knuckle everything. And what ends up happening is a lot of stuff doesn't get done. They're like me with a spreadsheet, a 2 hour spreadsheet that took a year and a half
right,
instead
right.
of just asking
Absolutely.
someone for
I
help,
love that example. And it's funny because faith in the process, as I talk about, or faith in uncertainty, it's really faith that whatever I'm wanting can happen, but I need to step out of my own rigid box thinking. And the reality that we all have rigid box thinking in some way. And those people that say they don't, they've rigidly decided to believe that one. We all have those conceptually rigid boxes because that's how we get grounding. And we talked about it on another one of these conversations, the idea of point of view versus opinion. And the rigid box is a point of view. We all have it, and we all have to realize when the box has us instead of we have the box. And when we can let go of that for a minute, step back out of that and look and go, wait a minute, how am I wrong about that? What else can I do outside of my box that isn't necessarily comfortable for me? Right? And it might just not be comfortable. And I don't know if it's comfortable for you necessarily to go, hey, I need help with this. Or it doesn't occur, right? And sometimes it just doesn't occur to us because we're so stuck in it. Like, I need to figure this out. I need to figure this out. I don't want to do it. So I'm just going to let it go. And we don't realize that we can ask for the help, or we don't realize we should ask for the help, or the way we've been doing it doesn't work. And so we end up stuck in a process that is actually not working for us because our process is to put it off or hesitate or procrastinate dealing with it rather than going, okay, I need to get this done. It's me or someone else. And there's a great book. I think Kevin's read it. I've read it, Who Not How, but that's great if we actually think of it. But if we
Right.
don't think of it and we carry the world on our shoulders, or we've just entered the world of discouraged and despairing that we can't move forward with this thing so quickly, we just move it off our plate and tell ourselves we'll get to it later. And what's really happening there is there's a lack of faith, there's a lack of belief, there's a lack of uh, what the vision is to step out and go, okay, how can I look at this from another angle?
Right. And sometimes sometimes it's also ignorance too.
Oh,
It may
absolutely.
not be, as at least from my experience, as you move forward in business, it's funny. Like this sounds bad, but I don't mean it to sound bad. But it's like it's funny how how less valuable you become the bigger your business gets. It's interesting and valuable just in terms of skill set. I'm not saying as a person, but just in terms of skill set, it becomes because as you grow the more in-depth skills are needed at higher levels to continue that growth or to open those doors up you're not seeing. And like you mentioned, it becomes a who not how, but and it requires it's interesting. It goes from like requiring faith. It goes from requiring faith for like smaller things such as like a spreadsheet requiring faith for like a whole position. Like we need somebody to take over this admin role. We need somebody to take over this designer role. We need somebody. It's which in a sense requires a little more faith because it might be like, well, what else may they like? I remember like we weren't really like hesitating, but I remember, we were being thoughtful with John, like about coming on like full time. We're like, oh, we want to make sure that, he's gonna, because he was a part-time bookkeeper in the beginning, and I wanted to make sure he could be fully supported full time. There's gonna be enough for him to do. Like it was gonna be worth, I know he was worth it, but I didn't know if the business was worth his skill set. Just that's like what I was thinking. But it's interesting, he came on board and now like he just keeps figuring out more stuff to do, that's helping the business advance forward. He's like, all right, yeah, we actually need to tweak. He's opening up doors we didn't even realize needed to be open.
Right. And I love that point. That point is amazing. And the way I put it is our fear keeps us from taking action, and the action of that next step is going to give us more information, is going to give us a new point of view, is going to give us a new outlook and a next step after that one. But a lot of times what we end up doing is we end up overthinking that step that's going to give us the next information. And so I think we talked about it before, is the idea of playing chess and playing 2, 3, 4 moves ahead. But if you don't take that first move, you can't see what the other person's going to do. And so we end up doing business in our head and trying to build something without data because we're not actually doing anything.
Right. And it's an interesting point too, because I mean, like with chess, you understand the overall objective. See, with business, like, I mean, sure, you understand the objective. Yeah, you got to make money and do good for people, but you don't know like what that's going to look like. And it's funny. So me and Vinny have gone back and forth on this concept, and they're both right, but it's just kind of looking at a coin from a different side, right? For instance, like with the John example, we were really tight on money, right? And to be able, I talked to John, we figured out where he had to be, and to get him on board, we really had to stretch ourselves. But he's like, I'm not really sure if we can do this yet. We can't afford him. And I kind of, even with John now, we go back and forth on this, and because they're seeing the numbers. We have the data now. It's like, what can we afford to do? What can we, what can we afford to do? And but the reality is like, I said this to Vinny, right? I was like, we couldn't afford you when we hired you. And for those who don't know, Vinny's pretty much transformed the way our businesses ran.
Well,
like,
we
couldn't afford it.
He's even a third partner now because
he's a third partner now.
Yeah,
correct.
Absolutely.
And so it's like we could not afford to have. If there was ever a time we couldn't afford somebody, it was at that time with him. He was in the office, not in the field, and we never missed a week of salary for him. So, but that's led us to where we are today. Like, it was paramount. So, but at there's a balance to be had, but it does take, there is a level of having faith that things are going to work out in the end, and having belief in yourself and in your skills, and you're really in being relentless. People are like, like, me personally, like, I really don't have, it's funny, but he's like, I'm kind of good at everything, like 90%, but I'm not like 100% at anything, but I'm 90% at everything. So I can kind of jump different roles. I'm like, for me, I kind of think of myself, I'm like 40% at everything. Like, I'm no, like, nobody looks at me as like, oh, he's really good at X. He's like, yeah, he's not bad at maybe this. It kind of sucks at that, whatever. But they're like, how is he in this position? Right? Why? How am I how do I own a business being in that position? Right? The one thing that I have that I think is paramount to where I've gotten today in any sense is that, well, two things. I have faith and I'm just relentless. That's it. I have faith things will work. I can work with very little data and chaos.
You got really good people skills too. And the people skills is really, for me, I'd say that the people skills is one of the major things that anybody needs to be able to be in a position that you're in. And some people don't have them. And you can really see, because that galvanizing connection quality that you have really does bring people to you, and they'll listen to you. And so that's a really good thing. But yeah, the faith and the relentlessness. One of the things that I think about is a lot of people are out there and they believe grinding is the way to go, and grinding is going to get me where I want to be. And the unfortunate thing about grinding is grinding tends to grind you, but relentless implementation is not the same thing as grinding, because relentless implementation, which is basically what I think you're talking about, is I'm not going to go grind myself into the ground, but I'm not going to stop. And so I will back up. I will look at what's going on. I will look at the data. I will try again. I will back up. I will try again. I will try a different way. I will keep going. And one of the things that Christine and I were talking about this morning is the idea of endurance for when things don't look like they're working. And just as you need endurance in a marathon to be able to keep on going, business is a marathon, and it takes a lot when you see nothing happening and it feels like actually it's going backwards, and things are falling apart. And I've felt that way in my business before. I felt like that in my life before. And then something happens. And what happens is all of that idea of you get back what you put in starts to catch up, and we start to get stuff back, and things start to fall into place. And it's much more invisible as we're moving forward of what's going to fall into place, but we got to keep going. And when you stop or you stumble, are you having the faith to keep going? And one of the things I was actually talking to another client about the other day is the idea of what happens when I'm working with somebody. And this is a very true thing. And I see this with other coaches or consultants. And honestly, I see it when people are in therapy and they get to a place where they're feeling good again. And so they stop working with somebody, right? And this might even seem like a shameless plug, but it's not. When people work with me, they keep moving forward. There's something about a synergistic faith that I have in them, and I have faith in what they're doing for when they don't have the faith. And when they do have the faith, we're moving twice as fast and they're taking the action. But if I'm the missing thing, or they stop working with me, or they stop talking to me for a couple of weeks because they got stuff going on, there's this idea in the world called entropy. And entropy is a neat word to say we're going to go right back to where we started. And what happens is people start to get momentum, and they start to get excited, and they start to do things, and they start to really live in that faith. If I just keep doing this stuff and keep talking about what's going on, and I keep taking the action, and I keep trusting, and I keep moving forward, things change. And then I stop working with that person that's fueling me. And then I start to get tired, and I start listening to me, and entropy starts to set in, and I start moving back down to something that I was before. I have all the messaging, and I have all of the idea, and I keep talking the same message, but the action is not working the same way. And what happens is when we're alone, we start moving into this place where we start to see a small decline at first. And then we start to see a little bit bigger. And we start moving into this place where we made all of these gains, and now we're going down, 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 right back to where we started. And that's entropy. Things fall apart. And if we're not intentional and we don't have faith that things are going to keep going, if we keep going, what happens and why entropy happens is because things automatically in nature decay so that new things can come out. But if we're actually the thing that's making it happen, and we start to see that slight decay, what happens to us as an entity outside of nature is we start to actually help it decay, because we start to feel discouraged, and we start to feel disconnected, and we start to experience despair. And then we start to really get fearful about that. Anxiety kicks in, and we stop doing what we were supposed to. And the antidote for it is to keep working with those people that are helping you, whether it's a mentor or it's a partner or it's a coach, to keep moving forward with that, because entropy is a real thing. And when we get mixed up in it, we actually start to decay it faster. And so it's an amazing thing, but that's why businesses fail, is because entropy sets in, and then our own lack of faith kicks in once we get frightened, and we're working against ourselves and we don't even know it.
Yeah. And another thing too, I mean, to that point, because sometimes, there could be just, there could be people you're working with too, right? And maybe it may be time to, maybe you need another person in your life too, or, that could happen as well. You kind of have to assess it. Or, maybe a relationship isn't working out. Maybe it worked out at one point. We talk about like the skilled politician, you don't realize it at
Absolutely.
first kind of thing. You could be working with somebody and it's going well up to a certain point and then it's not. But again, it's kind of, sometimes like they've contributed to what you're trying to do up to a certain point, and now they're negatively contributing to it. Sometimes
Absolutely.
you do have to cut people, loose, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
But
And that's definitely true. And I mean, we've seen that in your business, where you've had people that contributed in the beginning, and then they started to actually slack off in their own stuff. And
right.
honestly, what I would say is that's their own entropy, that's their own faith sliding. And then they got to a place where they weren't believing in themselves or believing in the mission or the vision. And so that they started, and then we have to look at that and go, okay, are they on board?
Well, right. And sometimes it just, I think of business almost like a net sometimes. And like,
Say more about
like
that.
the bigger, it's almost like a strainer in a way, right? Like, okay, in the beginning, like everybody's in it, everybody's fine. But as you level up, as the business rises, certain people, like they may have been useful at this level, aren't going to be as useful at this level without some kind of change or at all. I mean, some people simply don't have the capacity to keep going to a certain level. Like that
Yeah.
happens. So and it doesn't mean they're bad people or anything like that. It could be a skill deficiency. Sometimes it's just like a capacity deficiency. Some folks are not meant to be at a certain, everybody stops at some level. It happens. Everybody stops at a certain level. It just depends what level.
Absolutely.
You might have the mind to build a $10 million business, but you get to 100 million and you're like, it's just not, you're not the guy, you're not the person to do it. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple. Like that has happened in situations that founders and
I
the
think
boards
that was
have
more of a
disconnected.
personality thing, but yes.
Well, but this is a personality thing. Like you may have the personality to take a business to a certain, like it could be skills, but it could also be personality.
Absolutely, for sure.
You might have the right kind of personality, that grind personality to get it to say 10 million, but now that it's at say 100 million, where it's more bureaucratic, you don't fit in the culture anymore, kind of thing, and that can
Well, yeah,
happen with
absolutely,
anybody.
absolutely.
It's just an interesting kind of thing, because I that's the only thing I say because sometimes it's not worth sticking with somebody, even if they were helpful, because they're not at that, they can't operate at that level. It's just not in what they do or their
Yeah,
capacity.
I
And
was
it's
actually
unfortunate,
talking
but it
to
happens.
a consultant that works only with you know, I think $100 million plus companies,
All right.
because he really doesn't know how to not do big, because he's been doing big for so long. And
That's another
it's
piece of it. You
it's
might be used to working at a $100 million level, but you can't really relate to the startup entrepreneur.
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it goes the other way too. There's different. every level has a devil. It's like there's different skills and different strategies you got to implement as you grow, and you won't always know what they are. You might, it's like almost like I forgot what that is. That I think it's like track, like where you have like one person gets the baton and they run it like a certain amount of yards and they hand it off to the next person and they take it and they run
Yeah,
it
that's
a
a
certain
relay
amount of
race.
yards. Relay race, that's what it is.
Yeah,
It's kind of
absolutely.
like a relay race
Absolutely.
in a
And
way.
knowing where you're at in that, and can you run each leg, or are you 100%? That's great. I like that. And the idea of being able to have faith is like, am I at the right place? Is this the right thing? Am I moving in the right direction? And I mean, this also has to do with, okay, is our business moving in the right direction? Should we make a change in our business? Is it a drastic change? And I mean, Christine and I have had several changes, and I think everybody's had a bunch of changes from 2019 to 2020 to 2021, and now as 2022 and 23 have happened, we're in 2024 with new changes again, and looking at how people are spending, look what they're doing, looking at how they're growing their business. And we've all moved into, the I think it's DEI stuff and diversity, equity, inclusion. We've also moved into people working from home a lot, and how does my business work with that? And this idea of, we have to have faith that when we just take action, and for me, a huge piece of it is, as long as we're communicating more clearly and more honestly about where we're at, we actually make better choices. And it's funny how we haven't talked about communication in the idea of that. We make way better choices when we're talking about it, when we're looking at it. And I think that's that stepping back and going, okay, what do we really want here? And we were talking about it with your business, where somebody said, you guys don't seem like they're on the same page, but you guys are on the same page, but it's not conveyed the right way. Sometimes it's like, oh, so we need to actually communicate more so that we're more clear. And through that, our clarity actually creates faith in the people around us too. And that's a major thing, I think.
Absolutely.
And so, faith is an interesting idea, but I think that faith is also built through communication. And I'll say one thing about that, and I think we're running out of time. When I say faith is built on communication, it's not just to other people, but I have to be communicating with myself, and not just going hopefully things are going to work out. Like you were with the spreadsheets, a year and a half later, it hasn't worked out. Well, hopefully I'll get to it tomorrow. Hopefully I'll figure out something without actually doing it. And we do that with what's going on with us. Hopefully clients will show up. Hopefully hopefully that person will change in their behavior at my business. Hopefully I'll have an answer later. And that doesn't actually create answers. That creates procrastination and hesitation. But when we get out of the hopefully and we live in the faith of, if I dive in, if I start talking about it, if I start talking about what's not working, if I start talking about what is working and what's not working, if I just communicate about everything, people are going to come in with answers. And then the next piece of faith is to start taking action on those answers and communicate about those. And we start to see things move forward, as long as there's communication with that faith that if I talk about it, it's going to do something. And every time I've seen, when people don't talk about it, they shut down. They're still talking to themselves in their head, and then now they got a really bad advocate in their head for what should be next. And we start bouncing all around with, the shiny object syndrome, or what I like to call is fear-based bounce. And so really being able to think about, if you're not sure what to do, start talking about it and start getting feedback from everybody. And, even if they don't know what's going on, listen. You don't have to react and take action on everything everybody says, but think about it and really rethink it and then let it sit, and the answers will come if we're okay with ourselves. And so that's where it's going to really make the big changes.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what we got. We'll see you next time at 3 o'clock.
Yes. Adios, everybody.
See you, everybody.